Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Trump's trade policies. So the figures for May trade figures have come out, and it's absolutely hilarious, guys. Absolutely hilarious. This is the most funniest report I have ever seen in my entire life. So this shows as proof how Trump's trade policy has absolutely backfired and failed. So I'm going to show you from this Reuters report. And you can see here the US trade deficit in goods increased in May amid decline in exports, but ebbing inflow of imports likely positions trade to make big contribution to gross domestic product in the second quarter. The goods trade gap widened 11.1% to 96.6 billion last month. Exports of goods dropped 9.7 billion to 179 billion. Goods imports were a little changed. So what does that mean? It means exports have dropped almost 10 billion, guys, last month. 10 billion. And imports are barely risen. So this tells me that not only Trump's trade policy has failed, that exports are basically going down, meaning nobody wants to buy American exports or American goods anymore, which means countries around the world are diversifying their portfolio, which means they are buying less American goods. And this is the result of Trump's trade policy, guys. This is the result of Trump's ridiculous, formula that he used to attack every single country on earth. And now countries are waking up and realizing, you know what, we cannot be slaves to the American exports or American dollar anymore. We need to diversify. So countries are going outside US of A and buying goods from other countries. And this is the absolute proof. 10 billion worth of goods last month we're talking about. So if this trend continues, we can see over 100 billion over a year, right? Or even in 10 months. But this 10 billion could rise over the next few months because sometimes there's a delayed effect. Sometimes it takes time for companies to diversify from American goods to other countries because you got to find suppliers, you got to find a few suppliers, see what works. You got to, obviously receive the goods, however long it takes. It takes time. It takes a few months. So not only has Trump's disastrous trade policy failed, but it's having the opposite effect that he wanted to. So exports are failing, l- less countries are buying American goods, and imports are pretty much the same. So America is still buying imports from other countries. And what Trump has done by adding the tariffs to these imports, Americans are paying for the tariffs. Because when you add a tariff to an import, it's the American companies or American people that have to pay the import charge, not the country. So it's a tax to the American taxpayer. So the money is not coming into America. The money is being circulated and is going from, you know, company to company within America. So this just means the rich are just getting richer and the poor are getting poorer because money is being circulated from one person to the next. And he ends up at the top of the food chain, like people like Jeff Bezos, for example. So this is what's happening, guys. So the tariffs the Americans are paying, which is more than they did before the tariffs came in place, sometimes up to 30% more. And don't forget, when Trump had the tariffs, 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, there was a lot of people paying 145% on these goods because some of these goods were quite urgent. And there were some companies that paid that, some people had paid that. And now the tariffs has gone down to around, I think, 30%. Some people say it's 55% if you add the Biden's tariffs to it as well. And so people are paying a lot for Chinese goods. So I want to tell you something about tariffs, guys. I mean, Trump has got this 100% wrong. I don't know what the hell he's playing out or who's advising him. This guy is an absolute, I would say, moron. I'm sorry for the language. He's a moron when it comes to trade. He doesn't understand trade. I mean, this guy has bankrupted six businesses in his time. And the money he's earned, right? The money he's earned is not money he's made throughout the years. He's not started with nothing. This guy was trust fund kid. You know, his parents were rich. He was given money. He went into kind of properties and stuff. Like he made a lot of money through properties. But he still you know, with all that money, he still managed to get himself bankrupt six times, including a casino. I mean, you gotta be absolutely the worst business guy in the world to lose money in a casino. I mean, to bankrupt a casino. I mean, what kind of business sense is that? I mean, this is the guy they put in charge of America, and I think he's going to bankrupt America. This is going to be his seventh bankruptcy. So, you know, when it comes to trade, there was no problem with America's trade um, with the rest of the world. You know, before Trump came in, everything was running like clockwork, right? There was no countries taking advantage of America. You know, there was no China like, you know, taking American money or taking American trade. The trade deficit, you know, there was nobody stealing from anybody. Because end of the day, he doesn't understand what trade is. When you have money and you go to a supermarket and you buy some groceries, you pay the supermarket, say, $50 for groceries, right? So you come home and you look at your bank balance. You are minus $50 and the supermarket is plus $50, you know, because you paid for the groceries. So you gave the supermarket your money, $50. So does this mean the supermarket has ripped you off? Does it mean, you know, there's a big trade deficit between you and the supermarket? Does that mean the supermarket has, you know, ripped out your money, stole your money? No, it doesn't. This is how Trump looks at the world. Just because there's a trade deficit, he thinks other countries are ripping United States off. You know, this is utter lunacy, guys, lunacy. So, you know, when there's a trade deficit, you know, this is what trade is. You trade with countries with products that you cannot produce yourself. And that's what trade is. You know, there is no deficit, there's nobody ripping each other off, right? So if America cannot produce rare earths and they buy rare earths from China, is China ripping United States off? Come on, answer it. Is China when China sells rare earths to America and America pays money to China, you know, is China ripping Americans off? No, because Americans don't produce rare earths here, so they have to buy it from China. So this is what's happened. You know, they have exported manufacturing all over the world. You know, they've exported their manufacturing to China when it comes to iPhones because they cannot produce it in America. They do not have the manpower. You know, everything's too expensive in America. They don't have the supply chain. To build an iPhone, you need all sorts of things in it. You need rare earths. You need lots of metals. You need skilled workers. You need cheap, you know, energy. You need cheap factories. You know, if these iPhones were made in America, iPhones would cost $300,000. I'm exaggerating there. Let's just say $30,000 because it'll be, you know, it'll be at least 10 to 100 times more than what it is now. And that's just being honest because, first of all, you're going to have to buy huge factories and they cost in America. Land is not cheap in America. You know, then you've got to hire all these skilled laborers because building iPhones is not easy. You got to be very, very skillful. And even if you don't buy skilled labor, you're going to have to train them up. Yeah, then you're going to have to pay for energy. Energy in America is actually more expensive than China. Then you got to pay for all these licenses and goods and all these labor and trade policies that you have to go through, environmental studies, and you got to go through all of that, which costs money. If anybody gets injured in your workplace, then you got to pay lawyer fees, and people can sue you. America is the easiest place to get sued. So you got to kind of put a lot of money aside for that. Um, you got to pay for um, you got to pay for the supply chain, for example. So if you need any rare earth minerals for your phone, you got to ship them all the way from China, and that costs money and time. There's a lot of things that you need to do when it comes to building manufacturing in America. And it's not something you can do overnight. And Trump wants to bring back manufacturing all from China to America. Well, good luck for that. Which company is suddenly going to, if they have a factory in China, why would they suddenly move everything to America where it's 10 times more expensive or 100 times more expensive? Why would they do that if you're a business? Makes no sense. If America was cheaper to manufacture, then of course all companies will move to America because that's what companies do. Companies always look to save money. Whichever direction costs them less, they will do that. You cannot control a company unless you show a company that, it's easy to have business and it's cheaper to have business in your country. Then they will move. Otherwise, they won't bother. And also having a business in America, Trump has shown that he can wake up from one day to the next and change his mind. One morning he might wake up and say, "Oh, I'm going to give 100% tariffs on this country." Next day he will change his mind. Next day he will say, "Oh, I'm going to sanction this country. I'm going to sanction that country. I'm going to put all these rules in this country. I'm going to put all these rules in that country." It just depends on Trump's yeah, feelings on how he wakes up from one day to the next. Everything changes. That's why they call Trump Taco. Taco is short for Trump always chickens out because he makes up some policies one day, and then he chickens out a few days later, or a few weeks later, or a few months later, depending on what it is. Nothing's consistent. So as a business, why would you move your factory to America where nothing is set in stone, nothing's consistent? Businesses love stability, and it's not stable in America at the moment. Every day there's something different happening, different rules, different tariffs. So going back to my first analysis, again, you know, Trump has basically said all these countries are ripping America off. He put all of these tariffs on these countries. And some of these countries, like United Kingdom and Switzerland, have got a positive surplus with America, which means they, for America actually makes a profit from those countries. The deficit is in United Kingdom and Switzerland when it comes to trade with America. But guess what? Trump still puts tariffs on them. It's absolutely ludicrous. Then he also puts tariffs on these Penguin Islands and American bases and stuff. Not, they just didn't put any thought into this formula that they've made up from thin air. And this formula, is not even written in any economics book. They just made it up. Basically made it up. They just looked at the trade deficit divided by the volume of trade and times it by two and all these other they added all these silly conjunctions to it and came up with the figure. And it's and it's a ridiculous figure, guys. And you cannot put a figure on trade, right? You can because every product is different. Every product is different. So for example, when if America trades with China, for example, so I'm just giving an example, guys. So they might buy rare earths, they might buy you know a cheap kind of e- let's just say a cheap a printer or something, or they might buy the iPhone. You know, each product is different, right? And then China in return would buy soybeans from America, or buy oil, and they might buy Boeing jets, which they used to, by the way, but not anymore. And so you could class each product differently. And what countries do, they protect. The reason they put tariffs is they protect their local businesses. from being taken over by American companies. For example, if you are, if I'm in UK and our our best export is British cars, British engineering, Rolls-Royce engines, and things like that. So we would put tariffs on foreign cars because we want to protect our car industry. So if you have, so the onus is on you to buy British cars and British technology, right? If you start suddenly buy American cars and giving money to American companies instead, then it's right to put tariffs on these American products because you want to save your British industry. Same with farming as well. If you are a big seller of British beef and you want to protect that British beef industry, so you would put tariffs on American beef or Australian beef, for example. So this stops from you as a consumer from buying American beef or Australian beef because British beef is cheaper. So you would focus on buying British beef to protect the farmers, and that's how tariffs should work. And every country does that. It's a normal thing to do. If you're a business, you want to protect your prized golden egg, right? And that's why tariffs came out. So Americans also have lots of tariffs as well. I mean, America is probably the most tariffed country in the world. The amount of tariffs they have put on Chinese products, the amount of tariffs they have put on, European products is more than any country around the world. So, Americans are the biggest tariff users. If Americans use a lot of tariffs, why can't other countries use tariffs? So this is why this tariff thing is become an absolute disaster, guys. So this is and this export is showing, already it's backfiring in a big way. 10 billion they've lost last month in exports. So countries are already moving away from American goods, and they're gonna if this figure continues, you would see, say it's 15 billion next month or 20 billion the month after. Within 6 months, you could easily see 100 billion lost out of the American economy based on Trump's tariffs. But Trump's tariffs is having other effects as well. And you can see the GDP figure has come out has come out also today as well. And you can see the US GDP contracted at the rate of 0.5% in Q1. So the GDP figure is going down. Exports are going down. The dollar is going down as well. The DXY index has been going down. You can look at the charts for DXY, and that's been going down. So the US bonds have been going down. People are buying less and less bonds, and in fact, people are selling the US bonds. So things are not looking good for the American economy. Their debt has recently gone up to 37 trillion, and that's not going down anytime soon. So this whole policy of Trump is not working. In fact, it's backfiring and it's accelerated America's decline. So let's compare the results with China, shall we? And you can see from the first quarter 2025, China's GDP has gone up 5.4% year on year. Compare that to America's 0.3%. And this is the real gold article here. This is by CNBC, by the way. So I'm not using any Chinese papers. So this is directly coming out the West, and this is what they are admitting to, by the way. So overall, they are saying in China, exports rose 4.8% last month in US dollar terms compared to a year earlier, which means China is selling more to the world compared to a year ago. Imports have gone down 3.4% compared to a year earlier. So this means China is selling more to the world and is buying less from the world, which means their trade surplus is increasing. And the trade surplus is exports minus imports, basically. And that's the money that's coming into your country, uh, basically. But the real, but the real kind of shocker is this: China's total trade surplus has increased 25% compared to a year to 103 billion in May. So they are making a trade surplus 103 billion in May, and it's increased 25% compared to a year earlier. So imagine having a country where your trade surplus has increased 25% year on year. Imagine all of that money that's coming into your country, right? And if you calculate this, 103 billion in May, if you times that by 12, we're talking about 100 and 1.3, 1.4 trillion that's coming into your country per year. If you have 103 billion in 1 month, you can easily make 1.4 trillion. I mean, if this is in May, imagine what is going to be in June, July, August. This might increase. So the trade surplus by the end of the year could be 1.4, 1.5 trillion. Who knows? The way things are going, the way Trump is playing his tariff cards, he might even head along that road. So I also want to kind of finally finish this finish this video by saying, having a trade surplus, having a trade deficit, it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because the United States has got a world reserve currency, right? This means most countries around the world use the dollar to trade. And as dollar is used to trade oil and many other commodities. And most countries use it because it's easy, the system is in place. And it really doesn't matter if the United States has a deficit or a surplus with any country, because if they trade in dollar and they have dollars in their treasuries, they will use that dollar and they will buy, American stocks, American bonds. They will invest in America, American companies. They will they will buy basically American kind of properties, farmland. So all of those dollars basically go back to America, where America wins, right? America, end of the day, those if people are trading in dollars, they make dollars, and those dollars will go back to America. So it doesn't really matter whether America sells to these countries with a trade surplus or deficit. If they buy American goods with dollar, or even if they trade amongst each other with dollar, those dollars will go back to America in terms of investments. And this is what the world reserve currency gives you as a benefit. So if there's an inflation in the United States, the inflation gets shared out with the rest of the world, and that's what happens. So America wins end of the day. As long as the dollar remains king, America will stay on top. And this is why, it's more important for America to keep its hegemony, because if they lose their hegemony, the dollar could fall. So nobody has really explained this to Trump and his band of merry men. Nobody seems to know exactly what trade deficit is. Nobody's told them that United States has got a world reserve currency. And this world reserve currency, this dollar, is not backed by anything. It's not backed by gold. It's not backed by Bitcoin. It's not backed by anything, guys. It's just a piece of paper with an IOU, right? 1970s, Nixon pulled out of the gold standard, which means the dollar is not backed by anything. And that's as long as United States remains the top hegemony, the dollar will be king. But if they lose the hegemony, then that's it. It's over. Game over. And uh, and Trump doesn't understand that if he pushes these countries to trade with each other and outside of the dollar, then the dollar will fall, and everything will fall apart like a house of cards. He doesn't seem to understand that. So even if a country has got a trade, you know, surplus with the United States, or even a trade deficit, they're still buying American goods. And they're still buying American goods with American dollars, and those dollars will come back to United States and they will buy bonds, shares, companies, things like that. So what Trump is doing is making other countries realizing that, they cannot trust the dollar. The Americans have used the dollar as a weapon. For example, they have sanctioned half the world. They have stolen Russian treasuries and things like that, and other sanctioned Russia. They've done the same to China. They've not stolen anything from China yet, but they've sanctioned the hell out of China as well. Other countries like Iran, Venezuela. So they're basically using the dollar as a weapon. And because of that, countries are now starting to trade amongst themselves, use their own currency. They're using the Russian ruble, they're using the Chinese yuan, and basically they're moving away from the dollar, which is less risky for them. Because if the dollar crashes tomorrow, if the American economy crashes tomorrow, all that money that you've made is gone because it's not backed by anything. It's not backed by gold, it's not backed by anything. So if you bought stocks, if you bought bonds, and the bond market crashes, the stock market crashes, that's it. Your money is gone. It's disappeared. So all that work that you've done, buying dollars and trading dollars, it will be gone overnight. So this is why it's such a big risk using the dollar. And nobody's told Trump that it's not the world that's ripping off America. It's actually Americans that are ripping off the world because they are using a Ponzi scheme. They're using a dollar that's not backed by anything. It's just a piece of paper, a worthless piece of paper. That's exactly what it is. And the only thing going for them is that they're the world reserve currency. But one of these days, they're going to lose the world reserve currency because what history has proven is no currency stays around forever. Before the dollar, you had the British pound. Before that, you can go back to the Roman times. No currency stays as a world reserve currency forever. Every currency falls eventually, and that's just the way it is. And we are close for the dollar to collapse right now. I mean, they are 37 trillion in debt. Their bond market is collapsing. I mean, you just have to look at the bond market. I mean, the yields are just going through the roof. That's collapsing. The dollar is collapsing. If you look at the DXY um, charts, the dollar has been collapsing for the last few months. Gold prices are going up while the dollar is going down. Yeah, stock market is going up, but that's a huge bubble. Nobody cares about that. And in every metric, you can see that the economy, American economy, is not doing well. People are living paycheck to paycheck. Cost of living's gone through the roof. They can't increase interest rates. They can't even decrease interest rates because the economy is in such a bad state, and the Fed doesn't know what to do. So they've been pausing last few months because if they make the wrong move, the whole thing would just fall apart like a house of cards. And Trump has been calling for Fed to reduce rates, but the Fed can't reduce rates because if they do, then the dollar will collapse. The dollar will collapse even more. The bond prices will fall as well. They just can't do that. It's a big risk for them, and inflation will start, going up. So it's they just don't know what to do. I think they're stuck. They're in the last final stages of the dollar being king. I think it's already starting to fall apart like a house of cards. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say for now, guys. Let me know what you guys think. What do you think of Trump's trade policies? And how long do you think the dollar will last? Do you think it'll last a year, a couple of years, 5 years, 10 years? Let me know. Take care for now, and I'll see you soon.